Today's youth need teachers, volunteers, and most of all, well, they need you. I'm Doug Edwards, and I'm going to be talking with real youth mentors and students to give you the knowledge you need to be the best youth worker possible. This is Youth Worker on Fire.
Oh, you're trying to bring me down and run me out of town. You're taking what you want, but you can't take my rhythm now. I'm walking to my own beat, just gonna be me. I'm not replicating nobody.
Hey guys, this is Youth Worker on Fire. It's Doug Edwards here, your host. We've got Matt Ferguson with us now. Matt Ferguson has been on our earlier shows. Matt was in the student ministry that has started years ago at the church that his parents and a few other people already had started 2 years before I got there. It is really just it just really lines up that Matt is doing the sort of things he's doing. His sister's doing the sort of things she's doing. There's so many things, so many stories we're not going to even touch on. If you want to go and get a little bit of that, go back to the early, I think he's in like maybe 15, 18, somewhere in there. I meant to get that up before I got here. But his parents started that church with some other people. They had such faith that they hired 3 pastors after the first 2 years. Who does that? Nobody does that. It's just crazy to do that in such a quick period of time. But his parents are people of great faith, and so is Matt. So I'm going to let you know what he is about, though, in Storyland Studios. You can go look this up on the internet because I'm going to read it straight from there because it's written a lot better than I would try to make it up in my mind, okay? He's a Chief Innovation Officer. Matt's career began at Walt Disney Company, where he led a national brand and marketing programs for the Walt Disney World destination, Walt Disney World resorts, hotels, golf and dining, and ESPN Wild World of Sports. Over the course of his career, Matt has worked with dozens of multinational companies, including Cedar Fair Entertainment, the Biltmore Estate, Chiquita, and Habitat for Humanity. He joined Storyland Studios in 2020 to be their Chief Innovation Officer. Their offices are in California, Atlanta, London. That'll kind of give you an idea of the magnitude of what's happening there, and you can find them on social medias. But just want to give you that highlight. We're going to get to a thing called PlainJoe. That's why we're actually here. You say, why Youth Worker on Fire? Why is Matt here on that? Well, formerly, he's one of our students. One thing I tell you is the students you're working with in middle school and high school, dreams are being built in middle school, by the way, most creative time in a person's life. But they're the people that are going to end up signing your paychecks, creating environments for you, being your doctors, your lawyers, being the mayors of your town, being the people that are employed by you, being the people who are going to employ you, and things like that. So that's full circle for where Matt is now. Played football in high school. I remember I told this story today, Matt. I remember I thought as his youth pastor, I think he was a junior in high school when I got there. And I said, I'm gonna knock this kid in the pool. And I remember running into Matt in the swimming pool. I remember running into Matt, and it was like running into a brick wall. And so, Matt, you were a force to be reckoned with even in high school. Then you played for Florida State. And I want to say this because this is really intricate. He was a walk-on a major university football campus with Bobby Bowden as his coach. Walk-ons are not treated well. Am I stating that right, Matt?
Yeah, I mean, I was an invited walk-on, so I didn't have to come out there from scratch. I was recruited by them, and but still had to earn a spot on the team. And it's not guaranteed when you're a walk-on. Whereas when you're given a scholarship right away, you don't necessarily have to try out in order to make the team. So I did have to go through tryouts and went through the trauma of like seeing lockers cleared on a regular basis as I went into into practice each day. But I made it. Ended up playing 4 years and actually earned a spot on the team and playing on the field and was really thrilled to be there. It was an awesome experience.
Which will tell you a little bit about Matt's tenacity. I mean, his whole family's this way. So here we are at Storyland. Give us your version, and then let's go to why churches and nonprofits want to know about PlainJoe, that part of your nonprofit company. The other is for profit. And you guys are all over the world. So give us a short synopsis of Storyland from your perspective and why they hired you and how PlainJoe comes into this.
Yeah, so Storyland Studios, first of all, our parent company, we are in the themed entertainment space, and basically we're a bunch of former Disney Imagineers and marketeers that other organizations can now hire to get that kind of thinking, that kind of story-based thinking applied to whatever their organization is. So we do a lot of work in themed entertainment, but we also work with a lot of big brands, just kind of helping them express their brands. And we think of telling stories in 3 dimensions. We cover strategic storytelling, interactive storytelling, and spatial storytelling. So strategic storytelling, we like to say, is the story that walks away with you. It's more than just brand identity and logos and fonts and colors. It's the feeling you get when you think of your favorite brands like Apple, Disney, Google, etc. It's those words that create the worlds. And then interactive storytelling is the story you engage with, whether it's online, on websites, streaming events, apps, AR and VR is big now, or even digital immersive experiences that people experience in person. And then spatial storytelling is a story you walk into. It's physical spaces. We provide master planning, architecture, interior design, graphics, and theming. We can design a full theme park for you, and we are doing that around the world. But it's the story that you walk into. And what people love about Disney and organizations like that is that they have their strategic story straight. They know who they are as an organization, and they're telling a connected story from the time you engage with them online to when you show up in their physical spaces. And so we help other companies do that. And so we have a division called PlainJoe that works with nonprofits and faith-based organizations because our founders and many of our folks in our studio are Christians, and we have a heart for the church. We have a heart for nonprofits. And so through our PlainJoe brand, we can bring, a little bit of a different price point, but the same level of experience design, the same level of storytelling excellence. And then we get resourceful and figure out how to do it on a church budget, figure out how to do it on a nonprofit budget.
Which brings us to that point, how can churches actually afford something like this? And tell me this. Now, I believe that we cannot not afford to do things like that. You said a word, and the word was how you feel. That you have words in Storyland that help you feel something. You create environments that help you feel something. I just talked about in another episode about student environments. We talk about environments of training for staff, but student environments and the importance of how students that are believers and non-believers, Christians, non-Christians, feel when they come in to your environments.
Yeah.
So why is that feeling so important?
God has created us as humans to be moved by story. The whole Bible is one long meta-narrative story. And when Jesus came to the earth, he told stories. That's how he expressed the gospel to us. And so, God knows how we're wired. And so we're basically, stealing God's playbook. We're helping organizations understand what their story is. And then we're just helping them tell that. And that's just a powerful thing that causes people to connect and engage. And story we look at as a combination of character, setting, and plot. And so when we work with a client, whether it's a church client or a big brand, and we help them think through those 3 story circles, and it's really the intersection of those 3 where the big idea comes from. And once we land on that big story idea, that informs 1,000 design decisions. And so everything you're designing, everything you're creating is more likely to move people, more likely to express your story in the case of a church, your unique place in the kingdom and in the body of Christ.
How can they personally get in touch with you or who you want them to get in touch with? I know they can go to social media.
If you want to check out what we're doing at PlainJoe, you can go to PlainJoeStudios.com, and we have a little chat bot in there and a little contact form that you can fill out. But we really do respond to that. But I mean, if somebody wants to reach out directly to me, that's part of your audience, they're welcome to email me. It's Matt F, as in Ferguson, at you can use the StorylandStudios.com.
Okay, so let's go on from there. We're now into PlainJoe. We're now talking about churches. How affordable are you? I'm not telling you to give us a dollar mark, but give us some kind of reason why people should call and at least ask.
Yeah, I mean, we work with churches of a variety of sizes, from 250, 300 people to the mega churches that you've heard about. I mean, most recently, I'm helping my own church, Elevation Church, work on redoing our kids' spaces across 22 campuses. so that's a very big job. But we also help individual churches just with a design refresh to their space. And we can work with a variety of budgets, because even if you have like a stand-up concrete or pre-engineered metal building, you can do some things with those buildings, those pre-engineered structures, that can make them a lot more interesting to look at, just by facading them, by creating graphics and theming inside, by doing some really cool lounge spaces. If you do a good job of figuring out the story on the front end, it actually doesn't have to cost any more money to execute. So really, if I would say it's really less about size and more about budget. So I would say if a church is working on refreshing, one area of their church or campus, if you've got $250,000 or more to work with, then it's probably worth engaging us, because we can, for a much small fraction of that total budget you're spending, we can just make sure that it's better spent, if that makes sense. And then we work with a lot of churches on their websites. We've done so many church websites. We understand like why people use a website, the different user profiles on a website and how they behave differently on a site. So we do a lot of work with that. And then a lot of churches come to us for their brand. We've been around for 100 years and we feel like we've gotten stale. So how can we really look at our brand story and express that better visually? And so those are kind of the three primary ways we can engage with a church. And we love it when we can work on all three at the same time, because that way your strategic story is solid, and then you're expressing that in a consistent way when people land on your website, see your social media, and then when they show up in the building, it looks like what they saw on the internet. From the ether to the environment, we like to say.
Yeah, because we've all been to places where the internet looked really good, and we got to that place, whether it's a business or a church or whatever, and you get there and you go, whoa, that's not what I signed up for. That's when we get there.
Yeah, that's right. So we help with that.
You guys help bring the two together and marry the two. That's amazing. There's a book, Deep and Wide, that was out years ago, telling about how to build churches and some of the greatest churches in the world, and why they all have certain things they all do. One thing they said goes along with why people should bring you guys in, and that is, at the very least, go bring people in who do not go to church, but are friends of yours, and say, would you mind coming and looking at our environment and tell us what you see that maybe we don't see, and tell us what you like and tell us what you don't like. Because they said fresh eyes see things that we have stopped seeing.
Yes, that's right. Totally. Yeah, and in fact, that's a little bit behind our name, PlainJoe. The idea behind PlainJoe is that we're not here to tell our story, but we're here to tell your story to the plain Janes and average Joes of the world, that are looking for a church, or maybe not even looking for a church. In fact, my church, Elevation Church here in Charlotte, PlainJoe helped them with with their brand identity and how to express it in their space. When we were just building our first campus, I mean, we were meeting in high schools, and PlainJoe came in. I didn't even know those guys at that point, and they came and helped Elevation kind of figure out who they are and how to express that in space. And our mission as a church at Elevation is to reach people far from God. And so, as PlainJoe came in and kind of worked out that story, well, then what should that look like in a space? They arrived at the idea that, well, this space shouldn't even feel like a church. It should feel more like a concert venue or some place that they would feel comfortable walking in that doesn't feel so churchy. And so when you walk into our spaces, they just feel like cool spaces you want to hang out in, and they're not churchy at all. And that's because of our audience. Other churches we work with, we're building beautiful, cathedrals because they're a lot more formal than that. It's all about telling your story, depending on what your brand personality is or what your story is. And it's really kind of a combination of the story you want to tell and also being true to who you are. No, you don't want to try to be something you're not. You have a unique story. You have a unique place in the kingdom that you fill, a spot that you fill that no other church can fill. I remember walking into a conversation with a fairly traditional church, and they knew about my background. They knew that I went to Elevation, and I was having lunch with the senior pastor and the music pastor. And I said, you guys have an amazing music ministry. You've got the pipe organ, you've got the choir robes, you've got the whole thing. I said, there is a whole audience out there that they don't feel like they're going to church unless they have those things. And that's amazing, and these guys were in Atlanta. And I'm like, Atlanta doesn't need another Passion City. It doesn't need another, North Point. And you could just see the music pastor just breathe a sigh of relief. And he said, man, I thought you were going to tell me how to wear skinny jeans and start playing rock and roll on stage. I'm like, no, I mean, you guys have a unique place in the kingdom. So it's about telling your story based on your unique place in the kingdom and unique calling.
Well, what you're saying is that's a lot of maturity on your part, Matt, because I know growing up, we all tried to change our own churches. And maybe not you, but I did. And we grew up in the movie Jesus Revolution came out. And that was a lot of the environment throughout the nation. It was a very confused environment because nothing like that had happened to our nation before. As youth, we were trying to make churches places that they really were not. They weren't designed to be, instead of building places that were designed to be who we were looking for. And there are places for all churches. You're right. Instead of what I finally came to the conclusion of is we don't need to try to change the churches from what they want to be. Go create another church that is what you want it to be, unless there's another one around. But don't try to destroy churches that are already established because they're meeting a need. And that's a very true statement.
That's right. What we don't want to do, though, is I think we've fallen into a trap as a church that if we talk about Christian music or Christian movies or an environment built for Christian spaces, that has somehow come to mean substandard or cheesy. And we believe that our storytelling, whatever our organization is, should be worthy of the story. As the keepers of the gospel, as Christians, we have the greatest story ever told. And so we should tell our story with excellence. If you think back to the Renaissance period, Christians led culture. They realized that we're made in the image of the Creator, and we can be creative. And so if you look at those amazing cathedrals from back then, they really told the story of the gospel. I mean, people forget that the stained glass were the first projection devices, that really, we look at our projectors and screens today and people think, oh, that's a modern innovation. Well, at one point, stained glass window was a modern innovation to project the gospel image upon a screen, so to speak. So Christian churches used to lead culture, and we believe we need to get back to that and tell our story with excellence.
Yeah, that's great insight. I appreciate that. Now listen, touch a little bit on Ozone. You got Storyland, that's the studios, that's the mothership. You got PlainJoe. We talked a little bit about Ozone. You're not directly involved in that, but it's directly involved with you when you need it. So tell us a little bit about Ozone since it's on the website when they go look at that.
Yeah, Ozone is a technology for computer animation. And it spun out of our studio, out of Storyland Studios. Peter McGowan, one of the two brothers that founded Storyland Studios and PlainJoe, he has a brilliant mind for all things digital and interactive, and he was kind of a part of this thing starting up, and we have basically hired some Pixar animators, former Pixar folks and former Disney animators. And our team has innovated a technology for rigging characters that's basically using some of the gaming engines that we use today. And the characters are rigged and created within that environment so that we can get Pixar quality animation with way fewer hours than it normally takes. And those characters can be ported from video games to feature films to television shows. And so it's really changed the game in terms of what you can get done on a budget. We think it has a lot of great opportunities for spreading the gospel and Christian programming as well, but it's being used more and more by some of the popular secular brands out there that are doing animated entertainment. So it's kind of a cool little thing that spun out of the studio. And when we need to use it, like if we're creating animated content for our clients within an environment, we can tap into our animation team for that.
That's an amazing portion of what you do and what you have. Tell us something that we don't know that we should know about your company. What's some things you'd like us to know that people aren't asking, but they probably need to know?
I think the origin of PlainJoe is an interesting story. So Peter McGowan that I just mentioned and his brother Mel were sitting around in a coffee shop or a restaurant with another friend, and they were saying, "Hey, what's going on with the church? Like, I feel like the church is not well perceived for what the church actually brings to the table." And essentially, these guys concluded that, well, if we asked our waitress here, what does it mean to be a Christian? She might say, well, they're kind of intolerant and they don't leave much of a tip and they're not very nice. And Mel chimed in and said, yeah, the church isn't telling its story very well. And so that really started a whole conversation about, how could we help the church tell the story better? And Pete had this great digital background. He worked with IBM and Johnson & Johnson and some big companies. Mel was with the Walt Disney Company for a decade, working kind of on the spatial side, creating some of the great new spaces at Disneyland in California. He worked on the Downtown Disney project there and establishing the Grand Californian Hotel there as they were building their second park, which is now California Adventure. And Mel was involved in that project. And so they started up this little company called PlainJoe. So it was really started to serve the church. And then over time, with Pete and Mel's talents, they continued to get hired by secular companies as well. But we've been serving the church from day one, and it really is so we could help tell the gospel story better, storytelling worthy of the story. Really never worked in the church world professionally until I joined PlainJoe. And I met Mel at a Christian leadership conference, and he was speaking on stage and talking about his Disney background and all the spaces and things that he worked on. And turned out we were at Disney at the same time, but we didn't know each other. I was in Orlando, he was in California. So we just struck up a conversation after his talk at this conference and really just hit it off, found out we had a lot of friends in common from the Elevation connection, and just built a pretty fast friendship. And he introduced me to Pete, his brother, and we hit it off. And then, it was kind of interesting. I was a partner in an advertising and marketing firm, and we did a lot of work with tourism destinations and experiences, among other big brands. But we really weren't exactly in the space of Storyland Studios, but I was pretty intrigued by what they did and the fact that they work on not only branding spaces, but creating spaces. And when COVID hit, we all figured out, hey, we could work from anywhere. And these guys were growing fast, and they thought, man, what if we had one of our leaders over on the East Coast? They're out in California. Maybe we don't have to get on planes as much. And so anyway, after we figured out we could work from anywhere, we kind of put the deal together for me to join up with PlainJoe, and it's been an amazing ride since. Just to have half of the things that I'm working on be kingdom things, things that are eternal, and not just selling a fun big brand like Disney or Chiquita or some of the things that we've worked on in the past, but things that will actually impact the kingdom and impact eternity. And yet, I still have one foot in the secular world so that we can stay on the forefront of the latest and greatest of what's happening in storytelling. So it's a really good balance.
It sounds like a good balance, and that's why I was very intrigued by what you're doing, and you've been very supportive of me and the podcast and student ministry for so long, and for so many others, that I wanted to make sure that people got to hear your story.
Well, and you're Doug. I mean, you're a big part of the story because what maybe not all of your listeners know about you is that you always had a heart for using multiple media to bring people to Christ, to tell the story of the gospel. And so you would go into high schools and you would, take pictures of events and pep rallies and all that kind of stuff. And then you would do these multimedia like shows synced to music that they would play at pep rallies and stuff. And, we got to be a part of helping you with those things. I remember one year we hosted the national conference for our denomination in Orlando. Because we were based in Orlando, we kind of became the host church and put together some incredible multimedia presentations. Or we'd probably look back on them now and laugh, but then they seemed really cool. And we would take pictures of the mission work they were doing throughout the day, and then like edit together these pretty cool, like multi-screen, multimedia musical presentations. So as a result of that, like it was just a learning experience for a lot of us, and a lot of the people that were involved in that youth group that you had have gone into the media field, gone into entertainment, into advertising, marketing, branding, and church stuff. And so, you were a real inspiration for a lot of what many of us did for our careers.
Well, Matt, I appreciate you saying that. I'd often said, my intent was not to create media moguls. My intent was to reach people because we had media, which everyone, and my thought was everybody likes to see their face, when it came to high school and
That's
stuff.
it, man.
And they did. They love seeing their face on the big screen. But you guys, it was so amazing that you and a few of the others made it a career because you saw it as, and technology just kept changing and changing before our eyes, and it became more massive. And you guys have gone so far beyond where I was and what we did then. But the intent was, can we move people to change?
Yes. Yeah. And it worked, and it was an inspiration.
Yeah. That's what you do for a living now. You move people to change. You help them to feel. We all need to feel in order to be moved. We can say it's all about the intellect and it's not emotions that change us to Christ, but there is something about that warmness of God, warmness of the church, that place of gentle intimacy to where you feel at home when you're in those environments with churches, that you feel freedom And so I just cannot thank you enough for doing what you're doing with PlainJoe and so many other places before this ever came about. And your parents and your sister with and her husband with Samaritan's Purse. Just the list goes on and on and on. I tell people that guys like you are very quiet spirits when you meet them. And I told George Warren today, who owns Bay Lake Pharmacy, I said, well, when you meet Matt, because I sent him some of your stuff, and I said, when you meet Matt, I said, you're going to think, man, just what a nice, quiet guy. And I said, but Matt has got this fire inside. He's got this volcano inside, because great people like you come with a gentle heart, a gentle spirit, but there's a lion, there's a fire that's roaring to change and help and move mountains. And so thank you for moving mountains. Thank you for including me and allowing me to have you on the show and just be a part of your life. Thank you so much for tonight. Anything else you want to leave us with?
Oh man, I just would encourage any of the youth pastors, the pastors that might be listening to this program, that even if you're not ready to do any kind of a big change with your strategic, digital, interactive, or spatial story, that just think about what your story is and use that to drive the things that you do, the decisions that you make. And again, story is a combination of character, setting, and plot. So the characters are the people that you're serving. You're going to be serving a certain type of audience. There are characters that are foundational to your church, that make your church tick, that are part of the church's history. There's the setting, so anything that you create, whether it's a building, whether it's an environment, you want to look like you belong in your community, that you're a part of the community. So think about the setting, the town that you're in, and reflect that. Be a good citizen. Have great landscaping. Have a sign that people think beautifies the neighborhood. And then your plot, your story as a church. Each church has a unique story. You have a style, you have a history, and so I would lean into that. And if you take those three things and really think about what do those three things add up to, what is the kind of single-minded idea that differentiates your church from the other ones in the kingdom, and that'll really help you find your sweet spot and help you make a lot of good decisions just based on your story.
Thanks, Matt. I appreciate it. And youth workers and friends who are also coaches and teachers, and all of you guys who listen to us, and parents and grandparents, because all of us are youth workers if we're dealing with children and adolescents of any sort. And remember that adolescents, their dreams are the things that futures are built on. So youth workers, and we will see you later next time on Youth Worker on Fire.
You've been listening to the Youth Worker on Fire podcast. If you like what you hear, please subscribe and tell your friends. Also, leave a comment and tell us what you think. Stay tuned for more informative episodes.